Hey, Bob. That's cool. Hi, Eric.
Hey,
Hmm.
how are you?
Thanks for that email.
Oh yeah, that's
I
kind of
knew they,
interesting.
yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I knew they were working on that.
It's another one of those ones you just go blah, 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 blah. I don't know what it's like 700 culverts and half of them are broken, and I don't want to know
Right.
about that. You know
Hey,
what I mean?
Bob, you're here.
Yes, I'm just a special guest star at the opening. My
Okay.
other meeting is coming online. I
All
want to
right.
say hi.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're gonna make the next one so that you could come. What
Yeah,
will
this
it be? Tell me. I know we're starting to get a handle on it. What's happening here? Are you going the winter schedule now?
yes. I'll find out before I leave tonight's meeting. I'll find out the date. This tonight was the self-inflicted wound. I just gave the wrong date, so I won't make the same mistake again.
Okay.
Great. Well, good to see you. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, okay.
See
And
you,
like you
see you,
said,
Bob.
if it ends early, drop in again.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so, I gotta admit, so yeah, lots of culverts and they're all broken. Yay.
Well, they're actually not all broken. It's a
Okay.
6%, I think it said, that
Oh,
need
that's
are
nothing. Yeah.
critical. The other
Uh-huh.
ones, then there's some that are not so bad, but it's like 70% of them are actually pretty good, they say.
Oh,
As
yeah.
I'm recalling the numbers, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna mention that before when we get around to things like that.
Yeah, I forwarded it to the last email that theoretically had all of our emails on it. So it's just an interesting thing. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Hey, Tom.
same subject. So what the heck?
How you doing?
Right. Good, thanks.
Hey,
How are you
Tom.
doing?
Hi, Eric. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Charlene.
I don't see Charlene's camera's turned off. Here's Joe. So we just need Jim.
The link worked fine for me
3, 4, 5. Yeah.
on the calendar.
Yeah, it did work fine.
Tom and I worked.
Just so you know, we're trying to work all the Zoom stuff out. It's all, technology is just getting away from us here, as you're probably aware.
Tom and
away
I
from
worked
me,
last
too.
night. Tom and I worked last night on trying to create the Zoom link because normally Grace does that.
Right.
So we figured it out. I have the host instructions and Tom helped me answer questions I couldn't answer.
Well, you probably know more about it than I do at this point, but theoretically, I think we have to get to the point where, like, the idea is to get to the point where every chair of every committee can set an agenda, post the Zoom link, and open up a meeting. That's the idea.
Yeah, perfect.
That's going to be in a more expensive account to what the town now has. So trying to figure out how to do it the most economical way, but it's sort of at the point where you can't allow someone like, the former Becky or the Becky person to just have to start all the meetings and be there. It's just too crazy.
So we had Tracy here a minute ago. Here she comes.
Jen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, because it says
You're really echoing though. It's like you're a rock star on reverb.
Well, I'm on my phone and my computer. Should I do one?
I would
Yes.
do one. Yeah.
All right,
That's
I'll get
the
off.
answer.
Hello.
Hey, Jim.
Jim.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll stay on this and
Siri?
get off my computer.
Text Jennifer Wallace.
Tracy is talking to Siri. We can hear you, Tracy.
For some reason,
Tracy,
I
are
can't
you muted? Or can you hear us, Tracy?
hear anybody.
There she
Period.
goes.
Oh.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we
Question
can hear
mark?
you.
It says, for some reason.
I 21 years and they make music program.
So Tracy, if we can hear you, can you turn your camera on?
He's a submariner in the Navy. Middle child was born in Newport, Rhode Island, one of my favorite BBC.
Okay, Tracy,
Virginia.
someone's got a radio on in the background or something.
That might be me. I'll go to another room. My husband has the TV on, but it's on very low.
The mic is picking it up.
Yep, I'll go to another room.
Okay, and Tracy, can you hear us now? Let me just, she's texting me. Yeah, she can't hear anybody, so I guess she should maybe sign out and sign in again,
That's
Yeah,
always good.
Or
unless
call.
it's her speaker.
or call in.
Yeah, she texted me, I can't hear you guys. Can you tell the group?
I think signing out and signing in again is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I'll talk to that.
Are you gonna write to her about that, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, then I won't. So now and Joe, I think Joe is here. I don't see him, but he's turned off. So if we have me.
I'm here.
Okay, Joe. Hi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tracy's here, but she can't speak. That makes 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then we can have our meeting. So now I am recording this, even though I didn't do anything. It just was automatically recording. But I think we'll all say our names and we can open the meeting.
Just a technical point, can't we have a meeting with less than, because we're 9 now, not 11.
That's right. We could be 6.
We could be 5.
I think
5.
5.
It could be 5. Okay, good.
I think we're ready to go no matter what happens.
Tracy's
All
gonna
right.
try from her phone, she said.
That's what
Okay.
worked for me. Mine
Okay.
wasn't, for some reason, I couldn't get the video to work or the audio. But then my phone worked.
Okay.
Weird.
All right, good.
We had a few issues last night with our host getting cut off. It was the Shutesbury host account, and just be warned, there
Okay.
were some snafus last night too.
Okay. So let's see,
I'll say 7:05 start time, is that right?
7:05, we start the meeting, and can everyone just say their name for the minutes?
Seifert,
Jennifer Wallace is here.
Eric Stalker.
Jim Moore.
Charlene Galinsky.
Joe Salvador.
Well, we can start. I guess Tracy's not in yet, but you can, oh, here she is. She's wanted to be admitted. All right. So now, Tracy, can you hear us on the phone?
She's connecting, it says. Now, maybe?
Tracy, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
All right, good. So
we can hear
Tracy,
you.
say your name for the minutes, okay?
Tracy McNaughton.
All right, good. Okay, so the meeting is open and I don't see any public members, so we can move right to the next agenda item, which is to review and approve the minutes. And Tom, do you want to put those up? Do we need, because you had some questions about some things.
Yes, let me just take a moment to do that. Share. And
I'm going to end the meeting through my laptop too, so I can look at my laptop for the docs, okay?
Okay,
I think I can do it both.
is it displaying that?
Yeah,
we see yours, Tom. Yes, we do.
Okay, and you just see the meeting minutes, no other documents?
Correct.
correct.
Great, okay. So, over here, okay, so Eric confirmed he was not there. Is that correct, Eric?
That is correct.
And This item for the motion to approve the minutes, I'm sorry, it was the only one I didn't capture who made the motion and seconded it. I don't know if Charlene, you have any memory of that. I wanted to suggest if we had to, we could just wait for the video to be posted and correct it at that time and just leave them pending except for a little detail like that that comes down to it. But does anyone remember specifically motioning or seconding to approve the minutes of that last meeting?
I remember doing something, but whether it was that point, was that the
Yeah.
only time we had to do a motion?
No, because you also, I'm highlighting now on the screen, you also, I know, I noted in my book that you seconded the next vote.
Well, I don't remember.
So, yeah, I feel bad that it's such a small technicality, but
We can still submit the minutes even with.
Yeah, I
questions
think
on-
technically speaking, I think you can say a motion was made and seconded. I don't even think you have to say
Right.
who did it. Maybe it's obviously better if you do, but if I don't think you have to.
okay, then great. I'm just scrolling down to where I see my notes, so excuse me if I'm ignoring anybody else's notes. This discussion item number 6 was where I have in my notes that Mark Rivers mentioned something about an importance for him that he was thinking about or prioritizing 5 or 6 items. That seems to be the only part of this item that people, I know Jen had a question about that.
I just don't
for the minutes.
remember, I don't
And-
remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down by hand things people were saying here and there, trying to like catch the key words they were saying, and I did write that phrase. And it was in the context of, he was suggesting that I think when the different groups work together, they might try to come up with a collective 5 or 6 item list. It
Tracy
in no
has
way
some.
meant to reflect what anyone else thought of that. It was just simply a record of what he
You
said.
had it in your notes. Tracy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I recall that as well.
Okay. So if that's recalled by 2 people, I think you can confidently put that in the minutes.
Okay. Was that the only thing? If it was in that section, then I'll take that highlighted thing out.
Yeah,
for
I didn't
Cooper.
have any questions
Okay.
about the minutes, other than the ones you raised.
Oh, on the site visits, the highlighted part here for number 7 was about whether I kind of got a complete capture of what we discussed about the September 12th site visits, which were the ones on the high road, Locks Pond and Wendell and Watson Straits. And no one told me anything was to be changed there. I just wondered if I was capturing everything, because again, I only had my own notes.
I think, are you raising your hand, Jim?
No.
Oh, just scratching. I think it's good.
Okay. The next one was actually a little twofold, because it was when Jennifer displayed a document, so I would need a copy of that document. I don't think I made a point of asking you to email it to me yet. And I'll just attach it at the end of these minutes.
Yep.
But I didn't know if I summarized the discussion of it too tersely, saying that Wallace displayed a document with a basic outline of what a report from the task force for the select board might look like and what such a report would include. Because I didn't have more notes about it, I'm sorry. I remember seeing it, but is that essentially what we saw or what you displayed? I just don't
Yes,
know.
that's
Okay.
exactly what I displayed, and I don't know unless other people have a different opinion about it, because the document will be there attached to the minutes, you know, if any, you know, for more detail, people could just read that document. There wasn't any discussion about it, if I remember right, except Tracy
That's
did
what I
acknowledge.
guess I was wondering about, the like what felt like a gap in my notes, but maybe it really just was here's what it could look like. Yeah.
I think Tracy said it was helpful for her to see something that begins to lay out a kind of a map of our process, but right, Trace?
That's probably
Oh.
okay if we don't capture that. Yeah. No offense to Tracy.
Sorry, I gotta get the right audio thing. I'm hitting the wrong one. So yes, I did mention that to you, but it wasn't at the meeting.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I remember texting that to you saying, what do you want us to read on the FERCog report? What I'm not, it would be helpful to know like what we need to be doing with that moving forward.
No, we're talking about two different things here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I screen shared something that outlined, that was a very bare bones outline of what not only a draft of the report to the select board might look like, but that we would follow that in our process.
Okay.
And that's what we're referring to in the minutes here. But if you don't recall saying it, then we don't have to put that in the minutes.
I don't. I mean, but it doesn't mean I
Yeah.
did.
This is good. I feel, well, never mind. I'll leave all asides aside. Yes, Tom. Oh, Jim's got his hand up.
I have to pen my dog in for a minute. I'm gonna
no,
turn my
so-
video off for a second.
I do remember seeing your screen image of that page, so that if it could just be attached to the minutes, I think it would be fine.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
All right, so he's not here, but he's gonna ask the question we can see here, whether we adjourned at 9. Did we, 9 seems late, but did we, I guess it was a long meeting last time.
It was a long meeting.
Yeah, I think it did go an hour and a half.
So then that would have been 8:30, right?
We said 7:30 start.
Oh,
but-
okay.
but
so-
yeah, sorry, I scrolled on everybody there without warning you. But
Right. Oh, maybe we started a little late. I don't remember that, but I guess I don't remember very much about that.
yeah, it was
Like
7:30 on the
details.
calendar as well.
All right.
And I did add here that the documents used would include the report that Jennifer shared. So
Okay, I'll email.
once I get that, I'll turn it into a Google link and just add it to the minutes.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes presented this evening.
I could
And-
second.
Second it? Okay. Approved, and Tom will post, right, Tom?
Sure, we just have to do a quick roll call vote.
Oh, right, okay.
We could
So
try,
Wallace, aye.
Seaford, aye.
Salvador, I.
Galinsky, aye.
Moore, aye.
McNaughton, aye.
Stalker abstain. I wasn't there.
That's everybody.
I'll stop sharing. One second.
Okay. So the next thing on our agenda is kind of an open discussion of people's observations about the field trips that we took last weekend. And just a chance for us all to sort of share observations, if anything, bubbles up as being something that we don't want to get lost from there. I mean, I will be using, well, and you probably saw a little bit of that in the thing I sent around for you to look at, but I'll be using this part of this discussion to focus our, how we sort of begin to isolate out the things that we're thinking need the first round of attention, and overlay that with the FERCog report. So Jim's got his hand up first.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of restate my idea about the mission, and that we do on the lake have a number of areas where we can see stormwater discharge. And so we see sedimentation occurring. And that in terms of the discussion and the priorities, I would just kind of like to put that forward, that those areas, when we come to what interventions might take place, we should, I would suggest addressing those as the issues that we develop.
And we didn't really look so much at the actual discharge points, right? We looked at places that's maybe delivering water, but we didn't really walk along the shoreline and see where it's actually discharging.
Well, again, if several times we did talk to people who were mentioned that there were discharges that were taking place there. So
Right.
that when we were on Shore Road, I think Tracy, if I can put words in your mouth, mentioned a couple of places where the water was discharging into the cove and into the lake. And I think on Lake Drive, there were a few places where people mentioned that there were so again, just sort of things to keep in mind. I think sometimes we've in the walk-arounds that in the field visits, we're distracted a few times from issues that directly affected the sedimentation and the flow of pollution into the lake.
Fair enough. And I think there is a report, if I remember right, it was the habitat study. And, but I can look that up too, that actually identified, you know, outfalls, I guess they call them, or discharge points. So I agree. I mean, that is reducing sedimentation and stormwater non-point pollution sources is the goal. So that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, Tracy, your hand's up.
Yes, I was just going to mention that report that you were just speaking of, because that will show the discharge areas that the people who did that study found. And also, I think that a spring site visit when we've got the melt off going, which, you know, I mean, hopefully we're going to get some precipitation through this winter. And then we can actually literally see, which I think is going to be very helpful. But yes, you know, on this side, I can definitely point out areas where we have sediment. Jennifer, you'd be able to too. But the other issue is that when the roads are used as drainage, there's going to be sediment that goes into the lake just over people's property when it runs off, and because of the type of gravel that's used by LWA, that just runs off into people's property and ultimately goes into the lake with rainfalls. So I think that materials is going to be very helpful.
Okay, that's helpful. How about other observations or comments?
I don't
Tom,
know how to put my hand up.
you can, I see your hand.
You see my hand? No, that's me, it's Joey.
We hear your
Oh,
hand.
Joey, yeah, go ahead, Joey.
I got, because I'm fighting a cold, so if I start coughing, bear with me.
Hey, Joe, at the bottom
Oh,
says reactions. Just click on that and then you'll see a little hand.
I see the hand up in the corner now.
so Tracy, you have to click off your hand.
The report that was out, some of the culverts that are right now that need to be replaced. Is that something right now while we have no rain, we could put on a super priority list to try to get them fixed before we have a lot of rain? There's a couple culverts that they determined around the lake that are really bad. And probably right now is the best time to get those culverts addressed, either cleaned or replaced while their ground is so dry.
Right, so this is a question for our Lake Wyola Association members. If the culverts that you're speaking of are the ones on Shore and Lake Drive, and I guess there was another culvert on King, maybe. I mean, Lake Wyola roads, actually.
Well, the ones I looked at were on Window Road, Locks Pond Road. There were more town culverts, the bigger ones.
Okay.
That needed to be addressed.
Can I ask Joe for clarification? Do you mean the report that Eric just sent out?
Yeah, because I was looking at some of those.
Yeah.
Because they had all of them, and that was really good because it showed pictures of them and everything. And some of those, it said which ones needed to be cleaned, which ones needed to be replaced, and maybe now we should address those and get those what we can get taken care of before we get all this rain again. It'd be a great time to do that. That's all. And I'm talking about not the Lake Association culverts. I'm talking about
I
the
see you. Right.
bigger
Okay,
ones.
that's a good clarification. So Eric, I guess that's a question for the town, more like how, or do you all have a plan of approach about addressing some of the things identified in that report?
No,
Or do
we don't
we-
have we don't have a specific plan no, we don't.
Mhm.
We just got this report today.
Yeah,
Just-
right. it
I just saw it for
came.
the first time today.
So I guess
Um,
I gather the highway department has gotten it.
You know, if they did, they just got it today. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it just came out today. I think that's at least,
Yeah.
I think that's what happened. I got it from the town administrator today. She forwarded it to me and I forwarded it to you. But it was all today. I certainly don't have any problem with talking to Dave about that. I have no idea what, like, I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know what we have. I don't know what we have in the budget. I don't know where the budgets are at in terms of that exactly. I really don't know.
Yeah, I think that's something to respect, really. And it would be great if we could just go on out there and fix all those culverts whenever we felt like it, or, by we, I mean the collective we.
Yeah, no, Joe makes a
But-
good point. And
Yeah, but we have every of these agencies or departments have a process that they're just getting this report now, if they have it at all, so.
right. I mean, I know they've been grading roads today because my road got graded. So I know that I know they weren't sitting in front of their computer waiting for that report to come along the line. I know that much. But I'm glad to stop in and talk to him and just sort of mention it. That I think Joe makes a good point.
Mhm.
Who did the report come from?
FERCog.
That
Oh.
report was made by
Oh, that one.
FERCog.
Okay.
That was a really good report, by the way.
Yes, I agree. It was. It was interesting, if nothing else. I mean, I sort of was tearing out what's left of my hair reading it, but yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I like the way they made the breakdown based on priority. They prioritized all of them. Some of them are 50%, some are 75%. So they really did a good breakdown on it.
It's
Whoever did
very
it.
detailed, yeah.
No, I agree. The detail was good.
I'm gonna take a
But I
look at
noticed they
that.
did. I mean, I guess it was really just town roads because they didn't refer to the ones say the way we're just talking about on Shore Drive. So they didn't talk. They didn't talk about those.
Yeah, I
on this
noticed
report.
the lake roads, the culverts weren't mapped out either.
Yeah, these
The
are
way they
town. These
mapped
were
out every other
town-owned,
culvert.
town-owned roads that this report was about. The
Mhm.
one that I sent today.
How about any other site visit impressions from people who haven't had a chance to share yet?
I have one
One of
other.
my impressions was just it's going to be an interesting going forward. It seemed as though the closer we got to the lake, the more private property came up as, oh, that's a person we're going to have to ask or mention or get on board or educate. I know it's always been with us because there are even driveways like on Locks Pond Road that might entail a private property discussion with the person, but just seemed as though that was getting to be more of a point, like on Pine, where the build out was on the two sides there by the water. On Shore Drive, I remember it coming up a few times. So I wasn't there for the Sunday visit, but I don't know if it also came up more as it seemed as the closer you get to the lake, it came up more.
Yeah, I would say it was pretty parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
We
think.
did find, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, through the visits though, we found that a couple other properties that the town does own by the water to utilize those town properties for discharge would be great. And if we could, use them more, maybe change a couple culverts so that they use those locations, it would solve a lot of those problems. But using the town property, I guess we'd have to, I don't know what the procedure with that would be. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I had something about that too, but first let's see, Eric was gonna say something and then Tracy.
Well, I think just to follow up, and I think more or less one of the things that hit me on Sunday was, and I think Tracy mentioned it tonight, it's like how much the roads is sort of used for water removal. And so like basically And then it gets into the whole private property thing. So people have private property and they put a berm up on top of the property to keep the water off of their property. You can't blame them for doing that because they don't want water in their house. I get it. But where's the water go? Well, it goes in the road and it runs. So there's a river down the road and takes the road of it down into eventually into the lake somewhere. Because it's a very complicated issue.
And that gets to my observation, and then we'll get to Jim and Tracy, which is we talked about, I mean, that's great what Joe is saying about let's make sure we can identify these town properties and use a water drainage system to get the water to the town properties. But we've also said we think we need some kind of engineering expertise to identify, the right way for that to happen. And I just wanted to, I keep trying to not have an engineering study because we have so many studies, but perhaps if that's part of a commitment on the part of all the stakeholders, that it's a multi-phase plan, and that's the first plan. And I think that there are, if something large like an engineering study and diverting water to town-owned property is part of the plan, I think there's other smaller components that can get implemented while this larger one is in the works, is what I'm hoping. But Tracy has her hand up, and then Jim.
Well, just to comment on the engineering study piece, to me, the way I look at an engineering study is that it's the last step before action gets taken. So it's different than these studies. It's actually being, a plan that can be implemented. So, and in some areas, I think they're going to be really key, especially if it's going to impact property owners. But I was just thinking that, in regards to the culverts in the study that Eric sent out that need repair, it seems like it would be a good time to take a look, and Dave could maybe jump in and help us out here, is what, instead of just going ahead and repairing all those culverts, maybe this is the time to look at whether or not we need to change the culverts up a little bit so that they're discharging onto some of the town property. Instead of going and repairing those, and then maybe some of them are not in the best locations. I really don't know. I'm just sort of picturing this idea in my brain, because I'm not looking at a map of the culverts. Does anybody know, but by looking at the study that Eric sent, if any of those culverts are near some of the areas that we talked about on town property? Joe, did you pick up on that?
Good question.
I do think that there were a couple.
Yeah, I think they must be some of them.
That one was on Locks Pond for sure, but I don't remember the diagnosis of how it got categorized, but I do remember one at least being mentioned on. And then on Wendell, I think there were a couple that were also where they were either, and again, I think there was only one that was collapsed and needed to be replaced. The others were a matter of maintenance and clear out, as I remember reading it. But it was this afternoon and I read it quickly.
So it seems like one thing that could be helpful here is, in the same way that I attempted to overlay the FERCOG recommendations with what our ultimate recommendations might be, this culvert study has to come into that too, right? So that, and then again, I don't know what the town's process would be for prioritizing that work on the part of the highway department. So this is where it gets into the weeds a little bit about how are these different stakeholders and the work that has to happen going to get coordinated.
I agree with what Tracy was saying.
Mm-hmm.
As far as some of the culverts that they may be fixing may not be in the right place if you're going to use the town property, or
Right.
divert the water down by on Locks Pond, divert the water to the left and go right down to the dam area instead of even trying to cross the road to the lake and get as much water going down that side. There's ways you can connect the culverts on the opposite side of the road. So you divert a lot of water without having to worry about the culverts on that side.
Right.
I like her idea, but that would take, again, maybe an engineer just to look at diverting the culverts at the top before you do anything at the bottom.
So it sounds like also it's time to bring Dave in from the highway department and give him an update on where we are and how we want to try to work with these different components.
Mhm.
Jim and then Eric.
Okay, a couple different things. One would be with the town in terms of the grant writing and the development. I think the idea of putting it into Sawmill Brook or whatever would need an hydraulic engineer study, and maybe some environmental considerations about putting potentially some salt water runoff into that stream. But that is, again, that's one of my big priorities, is to try, and move to address issues before the water gets through the culverts. So I would think that an engineering report, and our proposal would be for an engineering report to see about the feasibility, and that we have the county and the town and our report backing that up. The other thing is that I think for all of the interventions, for the best practices, interventions, would need some smaller engineering report just to make certain that the capacity that's installed matches the capacity coming down. But during the walk, and this is where I get back to your original question, that I think we were able, at least on the west side, and I think on the east, was to take almost every problem along the shore back up to a culvert where the water entered. And it wasn't that all of the water entered there, but it did set up the flow and the course of the drainage after that. And there were a good number of cases, again, where I agree with the observation that we're talking about landowners that, but there is a trade-off to look for an intervention that would be in the grant that would help them keep the location of their shore. I mean, a lot of people are having erosion on the shoreline as well as dumping sediment occurring, so that something is being offered them to stabilize their shore. And I do think, that I think Tracy has a point about the general wash, but on the west side of the lake, as we go in from Locks Pond along Lake Drive, there are 3 places that I can remember easily where there were known, what's the word again? Where the flow of sediment is, is visible, and that along
Like discharge points.
the discharge points.
Yeah.
Well, above the discharge points, in almost every case, is one of those homemade collection points. So that across from the new house on Lake Pond, there's on the other side of the road that old piping that hooks up to the new piping, and it could probably be very useful to put like by Donna's house. I don't know what that best practice is called, but the sediment
Well, it was
trap
called like
with
a sump something.
yeah, with sediment trap with an outflow is
Right.
something that would. The other one is where there's locally group of neighbors digging a pit and putting an outflow there that is somewhat of a sediment trap, but is fed by 2 streams coming into that sediment
Right.
trap.
I see where you're headed with that. So it's like start with these discharge points and trace them back to the place, which is ultimately either on Wendell Road or Locks Pond Road, that's delivering the water in that direction.
Well, I would suggest, yes, that it's both, though. I'm a little bit skeptical about, I mean, the rain does fall on the other side, on the association side of Locks Pond Road. So there will be continued drainage issues. Dealing with the drainage along Locks Pond would alleviate some of those.
Right.
But then not trusting that I think we could name 3 points. I could suggest 3 points. The two that I mentioned and the one by Bob Douglas's place that would address a number of the outflows that and solve them. And I think that several of those homeowners would jump at the suggestion of getting support to replace the jury rigged thing that's there and put in a much more professionally engineered type of drainage. And
Right.
so that,
Okay.
and a similar,
Okay,
you
that's
know,
helpful. Yeah.
cut me short, is that I think on Shore Drive, it's much the same issue of taking the water that's coming off the road, the water that's collected in Watson Strait, and then have a few places where getting the water under the road with a sediment trap and then an outflow would solve a number of problems. And then I would suggest we consider the Laurels, which we didn't walk over, but certainly on South Laurel, there's a place I can imagine a sediment trap, and again, the outflow to the edge of the lake would solve some sediment washout.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so we have, I think Eric's hand was up, and then Tracy, and then Charlene.
Yeah, I was just going to simply say that just I understand, Jen, your reticence to engineering studies. Like, it's the classic academic. Oh, study it. Let's study. Then whatever. Here we go. But on the other hand, I mean, if you look at the lake right now, a lot of the problems, it seems to me, are that House A solved the problem where they got the water off of their land, and they dumped it onto House B, and then Bob B said, "Well, okay, I'll put it on number C," and whatever. It's just too crazy there. It's just, I think we're our own worst enemies many times, where we've.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the defense of the engineering study that I would have, is it's sort of coming down from top and saying, let's do this. And I would agree, we'd sort of start with the top of the hills and sort of say, let's do this in a unified, logical procession here. That's the thing that I think an energy study might, an engineering study might help us with. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And as Tracy said, it's not it's a study, but it's the first phase of an implementation to do that
Right.
kind of a study, rather than the research. It's not a study like, is there a problem here? It's a study like, we already know there's a problem, and here's our first crack at how we're going to address it.
Well, I think when they did the study, when they did their study, their implementation plan, they could say that it has to be. We could say that we would have to do it in phases because of the expense. So
Correct.
the engineers, prioritize what has to be done first.
Right.
And what's your plan here for, like, how would you make this work over time?
Right.
That's all.
That's helpful. Tracy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, kind of piggybacking off what Eric just said, I feel like what has occurred here is that culverts were put in on the Wendell Locks Pond without sort of a plan of what was going to happen downhill from there. And probably over time, new houses were built and the culverts were there. And so there's nothing there doesn't seem to me that there's any interconnected plan. There's culverts on Locks Pond. They dump off somewhere. Whoever's dealing with that is figuring something out at that level. And then by the time we get to the lake, there is no, I don't think sediment into the lake was probably even ever being considered. It was just getting water off of property. And so it seems to me that we should be looking at all of the culverts on Wendell and Locks Pond, and looking at them from the perspective of what is their function, like, and what is, you know, what where they're being directed. Is this a good place for them to be directed? And if not, change it. And I feel like, I know that kind of sounds like maybe a slow process, but I feel like if we don't start from the beginning, then we could just continue to get a tangle of problems that could occur, you know, after that.
Right, and you're saying, you know, a point that was echoed, or you're the echo of a point that was already made, which is rather than replacing culverts that are identified, let's say in this new report that we just got, it's like, okay, well, let's look at how this interconnection is occurring and what really needs to happen and where is this water going to get directed for the best results in reducing the sedimentation.
And for example, I think that we can really look at the culverts on either side of Sue Hoyle's house, who has now had to try to create her own little engineering study to get the water off of her house, because those culverts were probably just put there because, you know, from the perspective of water coming down Locks Pond, it seemed like a good spot. Because but then we've got this whole erosion happening around and behind her home. So that doesn't seem like it was a very good plan.
Well, it wasn't a plan.
Right, exactly.
So, but this is, I mean, I think that this is exactly what we are about, what this group is about, you know, is starting to create an interconnected way of looking at this whole phenomena of what's going on with water and sediment coming down to the lake. So this is the beginning of the interconnected plan, and starting to think interconnectedly, you know, that it's not, here's the town's issue, they're going to get the water off Locks Pond Road, and here's, you know, homeowners and Lake Wyola Association issue, and they're going to do what they're going to do. Now and I hope that we're connecting the dots among each other and with each other, and that's going to be the beginning of some solutions that address the fact that water is flowing across both kinds of properties.
For me, it feels like the best way to be able to visualize this is that if we map each culvert down, you know, culvert, you know, A on Locks Pond, where does that go? What's the impact? And like, we've got a written, and maybe what we could do is we could break them out and give each person a couple of them and do sort of like a write-up of, you know, it starts here and it ends up on such and such a property. On that property, they're having whatever issues they might be having. I don't know. It seems like that would, and I feel like that would also, in terms of an engineering study, it might save a little money, because we could be giving them a lot of information that they could therefore then use from that point forward.
Okay.
I would like to see an engineer set up a plan from the top of the hill all the way to the bottom, because you could set up a culvert on the top, and then somewhere in between somebody decide to build something or do something, and it changes the direction of the water. So the culvert you're working on by the road below it may not even be in the place where the water is coming out again, because a couple places on Shore Drive, that's what happened. Somebody did something on top, and now the water, instead of going to the right, it's going to the left. But having a plan from the top all the way down that says the water is going to go in this direction and it's going to end up here, then people on the lower part of it have a plan where the water is going to come out by their property. We can almost direct it.
Right, and everybody knows that. In other words, when Concom is, you know, giving a site approval for some development on the lower end, that they're also aware that this culvert is draining water, and that, you know, whatever is going to happen there or be altered there has to be altered in relationship to this thing that's already been built to deal with water flow. You understand, you know,
right, that goes
articulate that. So there's policy. That's the other thing, it is a very complex issue, but there's also, not only are there best management practices for structural stuff, there's maintenance, there's education, but there's also policy, town policy about how preserving the solutions that we come up with.
Well, right now may be the best time to set up a plan, because if you put an area where the water just charges up like in Watson's and everything, instead of having the water just go everywhere, it actually makes it go in the direction and the location that you want. So you would think your whole property wouldn't be totally wet, just the area where that collection system is.
Right.
That catches, so it's actually beneficial to the people that live on that end. You don't have water going everywhere, so your whole backyard isn't wet if you set it up to the right program where you direct the water so that it goes into a discharge area all the way down to the lake. Just a
Right.
thought.
It's a good thought. And Charlene, you've had your hand up for a while.
I just would like to reiterate, I feel we've done a lot of looking at the culverts and where the erosion is, where the sediment buildup is, and I'm wondering personally if we do need to take that next step with the engineering, because we're maybe at the point where we can second guess some of those culverts, but an engineer would be able to be a lot more affirmative in letting us know certain culverts that are working well and certain ones that aren't. And I still go back from way back to the beginning of our first meeting when I think it was Jim mentioned how important it is for us to look at the top of where the problem starts. And because we did both site visits at the top, I think we saw what some of the results were when the water escapes basically and starts coming toward the lake. So I'm all for the engineering study. I know it's expensive, but I think we're at a place in our meetings where we can keep going and looking at things and finding more areas. But I feel maybe the experts can we can define it a little better, because it's so piecemeal around the lake right now. And I think of that deep pump catch basin that's on Gary West's property. That was fabulous. And maybe that's something we should look at putting in around the lake and in different spots where the heaviest erosion's occurring. I don't know, but I don't know much or anything really about that. But obviously it's something that's going to work well for his area. And that's one of the areas where there seem to be a lot of problems on the roads. So I think we need to look at an engineering study personally, because mapping all the culverts and doing all that work would be great. But I don't know how you feel, but how do we know the water is definitely coming down into that culvert from way above? We can't look down through the property to see exactly what's under there. And I know when Joey Gorey came out, I was talking to him after, and he cleans out that area. And as long as we have people like that who are willing to do it, that's great, but we can't always depend on that. So we need a more meaningful plan that will keep us, doing what we need to do with the ultimate goal of stopping that sediment or decreasing the sedimentation.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be, something to entertain, that the focus of this, because it's not like any of the stakeholders are just going to go out and hire an engineer for 50
Right.
grand or whatever they identify it as. So we're needing to suggest to the, as far as I think our charge is to identify for the select board what we think the main issues are, what we think would be needed to address them, and some potential funding sources. And
Right.
maybe our role is to define the scope of the engineering study. These are the things that we would like an engineering study to look at specifically. And us applying for a grant is to do an engineering study as the first step of implementing these things, these systems that we already know. Here's the discharge point, here's the upland effects of it, and we're narrowing the scope of the study potentially, by saying, here's what we're trying to raise money for, just not a huge, in other words, I think we have to put the Fisk Pond sedimentation off to the side here. I mean, that's something FERCog mentioned, and that's, maybe not to be lost in the process, but our role might be to, identify, well, what would be the initial scope of this engineering study, dealing with these same drainage systems that we've been dealing with, but we have to articulate it somehow in a grant. We have to say, here have been the findings. These are the things we know are happening. These are things that we know are potential problems. And these are the things we know that we could do to ameliorate them, like use town-owned property, etc. I don't know, that wasn't very articulate, but I had thought in my own mind, I know we have to do an engineering study and I just want to get on with the construction projects. But now I'm wondering if our scope is more, yay, Bob's here, defining what an engineering study would be. But Tracy, your hand's up.
I was just going to say that it would be so helpful if Bob were here. He would know what we need to provide an engineer with, what information, like what more do we need to do? And maybe we don't need to do anymore. Like Charlene was just saying, maybe, just get an engineer in here and we don't need to go map these culverts. Or would it cut costs if we were to do some steps like that? So we should get Bob up to speed and see what he says.
So Bob, where we've been is everything from replacing broken culverts now while there's not much water to trying to figure out how to fund an engineering study to really look in an integrated and interconnected way to what's happening upland to specific places where we know water is now sediment is now discharging. And we're just before you stepped in, I was saying maybe the role of our group is to really define for a grant what we think the engineer would be doing, what would they be studying, and whether that's the right way to approach something like this. So you just stepped in, Jim's got his hand up, but is that enough information for you to jump in?
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
So what do you think about that? What?
I hate to jump in front of Jim. Jim, do you defer for the moment?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. No, I think that's honestly, I think that will be our best bet is to take the alphabet of different grants that are available, that some of which were mentioned in the FERCog, some we know about already, and get one of them. And the town doesn't have $700,000 to buy a piece of land, nor does the association. But there may be grant money out there that would allow us to put in detention basins or do studies, et cetera. So I do think that grants are a good possible use.
Jim.
Oh, just a short point that I wanted to actually, that I believe it was suggested that we try and do each of the micro drainages, have someone trying to take it from a culvert down to the discharge point at the lake shore.
Bob Douglas.
Oh, yeah.
He was just on the other meeting.
Someone's got their mic on. Is that you, Mike S?
Mike, I think you need to mute.
I'm muted.
Okay. Should I just
keep
continue
going,
then?
Jim. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So, I mean, one, it would be getting the information for an engineer. And I do think there'd be an advantage into breaking up the engineering suggestions or at least having a priority of them. And two, different would be to one study that we might ask for that Tracy would go for is to get advice as to what sort of gravel or material should be put on the roads that would meet the the requirements for not getting washed out so easily. So that's that.
Okay. And Eric,
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the point where we should say that, I mean, not to disband this committee or anything, I'm not suggesting that for a second, but just sort of say, hey, look, we're at the point where we think an engineering study has to be done. Then the question is how to do that, how to go about that. Does the town do it? Well, it isn't just a town problem. You know, it's also the Lake Wyola Association. It's I don't know. Bob suggested the alphabet soup version of grant. I mean, who is we that's asking for this engineering study? We have to figure that out. But I really think we should be sort of effectively be the committee that sort of says, hey, look, we want to write a grant to accomplish the following things, and we think the town should do that. You know, that we should do it with the town, how we decide that part of it. But that's the tricky part, I guess. The town and gown, or what do you want to call it, you know, that whole thing is going to be a problem.
the town in bathing suit.
Yeah, whatever it is.
And who generally, Eric, who usually writes grants for the town? Do you have
Well, I think
a go-to person, or?
I think the town administrator does. Unfortunately, we don't have, well, we have an interim town administrator, a very good one, I suspect, and I'm sure she is. But we're 2 or 3 months away from having a real town administrator, a full-time town administrator who's working for the town. But I'm not really sure who would do in this particular case, whether she'd do it or I'm not sure how fast we get to it or whatever.
I think that we could apply. There are some grants, and Bob has mentioned these, and you know, I was thinking one thing that we could do as whoever wanted to be involved in helping here is to research a couple of these grants that are mentioned in the FERCOG report, but they could be applied for as a partnership. In other words, it's not just the town that's applying for the grant. It's not just the nonprofit. You know, we're applying as a public-private partnership. Who writes the grant? You know, that's, you know, any number. I mean, I could probably write the grant. I'm not a great, but I could write a draft and then have it reviewed by a grant writer. I mean, we'll find the right person to write the grant. They're usually pretty specific in terms of the kinds of things they're asking for. And most of the agencies that I've ever worked with as far as granting, you know, they have staff people who will sort of mentor people who are applying. I know that the MVP program has a couple of workshops during their cycle where they give people coaching on how best to approach their project, the kind of things they're looking for in the grant. So but we just, you know, if we can agree, or I mean, our job, this task force job, is to propose something to the select board.
Right.
So if we want to propose a public-private partnership that applies for grants to do an engineering study to study these particular systems that we've identified as being key, I think that's completely seems like a right way to go to me. But it has to be a public-private partnership, unless if we don't, then if Lake Wyola Association could apply for things as a 501c3 on their own, and then we're not coordinated with the town, or the town could apply for something on their own, but you're not coordinated with the private entities. I think it has to be a partnership for it to be integrated. Tracy.
And that would be something, at least since the time I've been on the board, we have not done any grant writing at all. And I mean, we have some pretty smart people on our board, so I assume that's something I'll bring. We haven't had a meeting since our last meeting, so I could bring that up as a point of discussion at our meeting to see how people feel about it, or if there's anybody on the board who has some confidence level in grant writing to make it a joint adventure.
Yeah, well, before we even get to the writing part, the question I think for both the select board and for the Lake Wyola Association is, do we, each of these major stakeholders. I don't know if the state is involved as a stakeholder or not, but do we want to enter into a partnership? You know, that's like the fundamental question. Do we think that's, you know, required? And then make the commitment to it, both in resources and time. Once you do that, then everything else kind of begins to fall into place. Tracy and then Eric.
Yeah, so back to Bob. What I was really asking about from you is, before you came on, we were discussing what more we as a committee may need to do when we talked about, you know, mapping culverts and their flow from up above to the next level and down to the lake. And, you know, what in your experience is required in order to secure a grant? Like, what information would we want to put together to help out with that next process of the grant writing to make it more successful? Or do you just kind of go from where we are right now to apply for the grant and let the engineers do all that? How does this work?
Bob, you're muted.
I'm much more interested in muted. There are a few different ways to go. The one that has been massively successful, I found throughout the ages, is you take a look at all the grants that were approved last year, and then you shamelessly plagiarize them, and put in your own information. That's a very effective technique. Another one is you do a preliminary study of where the trouble areas are. You bring in an engineering firm in for a few $1,000s, and they kind of pinpoint the areas that need working on. Maybe we already have that with the FERCog stuff, but then you use that as the springboard to then go for the big money, the $1 million or whatever, in order to fix the problem. So the reason why I brought up Chairperson Wallace, the many different grants, is I think if we kind of maybe share those out, we'll be able to find one or two that really do hit the nail on the head for our particular process. And as collectively as a group, if we can find the right one, we find out what they're looking for, and then try and hit each one of those touch points.
I will go back to that in 1 second. Eric.
No, I had a very quick question, was just whether or not FERCog might be of help in writing the grant, you know, putting us together with the right grant, which one to apply for and so forth. Would FERCog be able to help? That's all. And I don't know the answer to that question, but
I think they probably, I think they probably would, and in a sense they already have, because
yes,
they've identified. The only thing I feel like they really missed was what's going on shore and Pine, but they've identified a lot of what we're talking about. And they've proposed all these different possible funding vehicles, some of which are limited to public, some are private-public partnerships, and some are just private.
Well, I wonder if they'd be the next people to talk to, frankly. I mean, I wonder if they'd be the next, you know, next people to talk to, just sort of say, well,
I think so,
here we are,
know,
we've read the report, now what do we do?
Well, I think, as Becky suggested before she left, when she was in touch with them on our behalf, which is when our task force has some cogent questions for them, pointed, very specific questions, that then they will be a resource for us. You know, but we need to identify what we're going to be asking them. So I think, and, you know, I have reached out to them just last week about meeting with us, even though we just have an interim administrator, given the length of time it will probably take to get a full.
No, I think that's a good idea.
I didn't hear back, but I'll keep pressing that. So yeah, I mean, I think we should arrange, but I think if we could get familiar first with some of these sources. So what I was going to suggest is that, if we wanted each of us to look at that list of funding sources that they've identified and really look at them on their websites and what are their criteria and which ones could be, do you think would be useful for us, start to narrow that down. I don't know that FERCog hit on all of them either. You know, there might be others.
We could ask them that, I guess.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
What-
for sure. But I don't know. I mean, do you think, are we at a place where as a group, you know, some of us will volunteer to take a look at one or two of them that are on their list and see if they apply?
Does FERCog itself have any money?
No, I don't think they do.
I don't think there's that kind of money. They have some money, but
Mhm.
just to do their own studies and this and that, but I don't think they have grant money, that kind of money. They don't have real money, as we say in the military business or whatever.
Right.
I-
Tracy.
Oh, am I muted? No. So I think that one question that we need to get answered in terms of the public-private partnership is, I do recall that when we were doing the walkthrough with FERCog 2 years ago, I guess it was, I had asked Tamsin, because she was initially saying that, the fact that this was private roads, was a possible problem for grant funding. And I let her know that the Lake Wyola Association was a public charity, wasn't homeowners association, and she said, oh, that may make a difference. So I think and I do know that back in the day, when Lake Wyola Associations, before I lived here, but I've gotten the story from several people, that the reason that they applied to be a 501c3 public charity is because Bill Elliott, who used to work for DEP and was the former head of our Board of Health, had said that is going to be your key to getting grant funding, because you're going to need it, because you're not going to be able to maintain the roads with the way you're operating, which was operating just more as like a social club. So I think that that's a key for us, because it seems to me that then we can easily partner with the town.
Yeah, and it may, I mean, it might, I don't know these grants here in Massachusetts in this particular area, but it makes an application stronger.
Yeah, I would say.
It totally makes it stronger, because there are more resources being brought to bear. There's in-kind contributions. In other words, the contribution isn't only coming from the town highway department. So these things normally strengthen an application rather than weaken it.
I think
it's a matter of finding ones that are eligible for these types of partnerships.
Right. And I think that that's a key piece, because if you think about it, if this was a homeowners association, which means that each homeowner owns in their deed, owns the part of the road that's right in front of their house up to the midline, then that would be a very difficult thing to get grant funding, because there would be all these little pieces of road, but we don't have that situation. Lake Wyola Association owns the roads. The roads are a complete cohesive thing that can be, the grant funding. I think, that makes it, because that's what Tamsin originally thought. She thought it was a homeowners association, and that was a barrier, but we don't have that. So that's good.
Yeah, and it's good because, let's say, if the town couldn't make improvements, if the town was trying to protect the lake and it has, some town-owned roads, it couldn't make the improvements that would be needed to protect the lake without dealing with the 501c3. You see where I'm headed with that? We need each other. None of these plans can work without a mutual cooperation. Anyway, that just strengthens our case. So we're already at 8:15.
Can I ask a quick question of Bob?
Yeah.
Bob, you mentioned that one of the strategies for grant writing is to actually get already written grants that have been approved and sort of take pieces of it, or I think you used the word plagiarize.
Yes.
where can we get our hands on those? I mean, is there a place where they're all consolidated so that we could maybe look at some of them?
You know, the one specifically that I had in mind, Charlene, coincidentally, I got a grant from the MVP, and the grant that followed it in part of the presentation that the state gave was for the town of Chester in Western Mass, and they got a specific muddy road grant to help with their muddy road erosion problems. So I thought, well, that would be perfect if they have a problem just like ours, yet and we're able to get this large windfall from the state. So that was one that I kind of made a mental note. Look up town of Chester, Massachusetts MVP grant. And so anyway, that's one of them.
Okay. And Eric, didn't we get an MVP grant for something else in Shutesbury?
Yeah, we're sort of in the process of getting one. We got one for the library to put solar panels in the library. The library is going to be built so there's no petroleum burning capability there. It's all solar. And we got the grant for that. As I understand the situation, is a bit of a snag right now because MVP wanted us to have a backup system to that solar system. That is to say, they want batteries, and for some reason they can't. And I'm talking out of school. I don't know exactly what the story is, but I think the bottom line is that they finally agree with MVP that they would have a truck. The MVP would fund an electric pickup truck, a Ford Lightning, that would be a backup source of power for the library. Well, they don't make the Ford Lightning anymore. They stopped making it. And if it was a backup source, it would only be good for a couple of hours. So I mean, I think I'm not sure what's going on there right now. But hopefully they haven't said no yet. They have actually given us the grant, but. So
Yeah.
I don't have more details than that.
And I'm going to share my screen for a second here, okay? Let's see, I'm doing it. What do I have to do to one participant? Okay, here it is. Okay, so are you seeing this now? It says potential funding sources.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is on page 75 of the FERCog plan. And each of these are FERCog suggestions of potential funding sources for implementing many of the solutions that we're talking about. And I'm proposing that we look into some of these are actual, some says Lake Wyola Association dues or Town Community Preservation Act funds. Those probably we could look at separately, but what kind of projects does the Massachusetts Environmental Trust fund? Would they fund an engineering study to do the kind of things that we're talking about? This is where we have to kind of look into, which one of these might suit us or which combination might suit us. Let's say if this is just hypothetical, but if the Lake Wyola Association decided that their contribution to this joint effort would be as a nonprofit to try to get a grant, raise money to use only this right material for the roads, because it is more expensive and it takes more maintenance. Also, all the culverts on the road take more maintenance. So what kind of sources of funding could they bring to the table, either their own or otherwise? But so FERCog has already identified these as being what they think are the first go round, first kinds of sources. It's interesting that they have the MVP grant here as only town eligible to apply, Bob, but you were saying your understanding is that no, that could be a partnership.
Yeah, so I think what they meant by that is not all towns within our particular area are eligible to apply. Shutesbury did go through the whole process of having the initial meetings, so it is available, eligible to apply. I think that was the hurdle, and Shutesbury indeed has done
Has
those initial
gotten one.
meetings.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, that is one grant, that MVP grant, that can be used for both public lands, which usually is, and private lands. So I think it might be a very good match for our particular problems surrounding the lake.
Right. So does someone want to take this and dive in to its details and see how it might help us to use it to fund one of these engineering studies? You know, they say in another place, I'm going to scroll fast up here. Okay. Also, in this section of the report, which starts on page 72, they identify, I mean, this is really their summary of funding needed to implement their plan. Now, theirs is way comprehensive, you know, but it's a starting point for us. So they talk about a hydraulic and hydrologic study, and that those could be combined for cost savings. So they're saying we need an engineering consultant, and we might need $30,000. These, you know, this is just ballpark. So what's where's the grant? You know, who would we approach for such a grant? How could that be done? Sediment loading study, you know, so they have a lot more in your road surface study. I think they've identified already that the current material that's used to surface the roads is, you know, not adequate by any means. And I think we see that too. We were kicking sand around on the roads when we were walking. But anyway, all of that goes to say that then they follow all of this up with these grants. So if they've done this legwork already, can we then dive into each of these and say, okay, this is out, this is great potential for us, this is out, this is great. So what do you guys think at 8:19? Tracy?
I suggest, how many are here that are,
How many what?
red, I mean, how many blue?
1, 2, 3, 4,
Seven.
5, 6, 7.
And how many of us are there? Not 8?
There might be 7 people here tonight.
Oh,
We're at 7, right?
I say we all take one. I'll take the section 319 non-point source competitive grant program.
Yay, Tracy, way to go. First person to sign up. Okay, other takers, going.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and poke my head into the MVP, because that one I am familiar with.
Okay.
Right.
I'll do the Massachusetts Environmental Trust.
I'll do the Chapter 90 fund, since that's sort of what I deal with anyway, so.
Okay.
I have no preference because I don't know anything about any of these.
Yeah, well,
Just
right,
pick one.
exactly.
You will when you're done researching it.
I just hope I can give the time. We're in the midst of redoing our house with that fire, but I'll give it a shot. How about if I try the section, what is it, 319 non-point source competitive grant program?
I think that's the one Tracy picked.
Oh, you did, Tracy?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think that one
The
got
ones
selected.
that are open are Long Island Sound Futures, which probably doesn't apply to us so much. But they thought it did. So anyway, Long Island Sound
Well,
Futures.
I'll try that one.
Okay. And how about the 604 Water Quality Management Planning Grant Program?
I'll give that a shot.
Okay. And is someone doing FEMA?
I think
I'll take what Joe doesn't take.
I think we only need FEMA now, right? That's the only one we don't have yet.
FEMA will probably be gone now, just saying.
Yeah,
Oh
that's true.
gosh, I'll take it.
All right, I think we covered all of them.
Okay, can I ask a question? Because
Yeah.
being more familiar with New York City and New York State kind of politics, is there such a thing as members' money for the state assembly?
Oh, Eric, you might.
Which
You're
is,
talking about earmarks, basically, earmarks effective, we call
well,
them
it
earmarks.
depends on how it gets the rules around it. But yeah, approaching assemblyman or
Yeah, there are earmarks, there are earmarks, in fact, I think we've got an earmark for the library recently from Joe
do you think
Comerford.
there's a chance of going to a politician because it with us, requesting a small, get us up a level type of grant from that?
I think
Again,
it'd be
I'm not
worth talking to
familiar.
Joe
Here it
Comerford.
gets used for planting, 3 blocks of street trees and stuff like that from the city council of New York. But, and the other was, is there, who administers the Great Ponds of Massachusetts, given that Lake Wyola is a state designated? And
I think that's the Massachusetts Fisheries and Game, but I'm not sure about that.
yeah, I was just wondering if they administer and if they have money for, a great pond, if that status gets us anything.
I thought Lake Wyola's owned by the town.
But it's also designated as a great pond. It may be that the issue of ownership I've never really understood, to be honest. But at one point I was told that the state had, designated it as a great pond. I don't know if that gives the state any obligation or oversight over what happens on the lake at all.
It must, because the DEP had to sign off on this draft from FERCog before it could become a real report. Okay, we're going to take questions from Tracy and Bob, and then we might have to consider wrapping things up a little bit, but let's hear from Tracy first.
Well, I was just going to say that as far as my understanding of the Great Pond designation is that, and maybe Bob Douglas will know a little bit more, but that I remember Becky saying at a meeting recently that made it open to the public. So it was public, public access has to be given to the lake. And in terms of ownership, the town owns the land under the lake. It's kind of a weird thing, but they own like the ground, and the state owns the water. So that's how, so I don't know what that really ultimately means. I mean, I know that it means like the water is under the jurisdiction of like the environmental police, and the Environmental Protection Act is enforced by the environmental police, that kind of thing. But and they enforce the rules of boating and swimming and stuff like that. But I don't know, I'm feeling like there must be some benefit to owning the land under the lake. Like, I feel like we should find that out, and that maybe like along what you're saying, Jim, is that maybe that we can access some funding based on that ownership.
Yeah, that's what I was going after.
That's good. And who had, Bob, you had a hand up, right? No.
I think the state does have the rights to the entirety of the lake. It's a great pond, and it's under state jurisdiction. I'll do a little bit deeper dig into that, and I'll have an answer for you for that in your next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, good. And Eric?
I'll just quickly, I will look into town community preservation fund as well. Just get a rough sense of that. I think there is some money there that is possible to use. So great. I think we could use it in a public-private partnership. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll check it out.
And we also, I mean, I know that there's we call them earmarks. I know that the Lake Wyola Association has designated uses for its environmental fund, but there's some chunks of money in there. And maybe there's some thought to be given to that. But one thing that I don't want to lose here, I think this is really important before we adjourn, is Mark from LWAC as was identified when we reviewed the minutes, feels pretty strongly that there should be a coordinated choice of priorities that's the coming together of LWAC and CONCOM and our task force. And what I'm unclear about, and I don't know if Eric, you have any insight into this, is that we had a specific charge from the select board to report back on initial recommendations about dealing with, deliverance of sediment into the lake. And while I'm all for coordinating with other, committees and departments and whatnot, it wasn't my understanding that we're to have joint decisions about priorities. I always thought that, and I think in the charge it was that we were to, present our perspective to CONCOM and to LWAC and the Lake Wyola Association, and sort of get some feedback or buy-in even. But if we're moving along right now, pretty focused on raising money for an engineering study for a particular set of drainage issues that we've identified. We haven't coordinated that with anybody else yet. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking for some perspective from the group about Mark's belief about needing to prioritize together.
I think once you get the engineers involved, they're gonna have to coordinate with conservation and some of the other people, like the Lake Wyola part of it, only because of the way the water would run.
True, except that this isn't really, it's about even prioritizing an engineering study that is targeted to certain areas. Like if we're saying we want to fund an engineering study and we're applying for a grant and the study is to target these specific areas, do we need to prioritize those areas along with these other key players in the town? And maybe I'm too narrowly reading our charge, Eric.
Yeah, I think we're fine just doing it doing it ourselves. And I think, as Joe was suggesting, eventually, I mean, other people are going to have to be involved in all this anyway. I mean, and there'll be a good reason to have everybody involved in it. But I don't think right now we can do what we're doing right now, investigating grants and that kind of thing for the engineering thing.
Well, here's an
yeah.
example. Here's an example. We're not touching on sedimentation into the North Cove at all, even though that was identified as a site by FERCOG. And it could be viewed as a priority to deal with that sedimentation into the cove before any other sedimentation or discharge point was dealt with. And I don't know how sensitive we have to be to that.
My personal view would be we don't have to. We can certainly mention it or whatever in any kind of engineering study or request for engineering study, but it seems to me we're really about the roads, and about the roads and people's property. That's our priority. It seems to me. I could just be wrong about that, but that's my sense of it.
Tracy, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah, I feel like that looking at priorities based on the people, like who's impacted, with ultimately the lake being impacted, I guess, kind of getting more bang for our buck. Like we have a lot of homeowners that are impacted, and the roads, road erosion causing sediment into the lake, sediment going over residents' properties into the lake, water erosion causing property damage, and then ultimately still all of it going into the lake. So it feels to me like that is the priority, with then going after that sort of kind of, to me, secondary sediment that doesn't affect as many people directly, but still is a problem. And also the cove is a much bigger issue because we have to deal with Fishbrook, which is another town. It's just, that's just a lot bigger issue.
Okay,
Engineering study would be difficult because we'd have to get Wendell's permission.
right. So I've been invited to give an update to LWAC on Saturday. And I've been invited to give an update to Concom on December 12th of what our work has been and, you know, where we are, what we're thinking about. We could also invite, I think we had talked about a joint meeting at one point, you know, I don't know if we're there yet, but we could also invite Concom and LWAC to attend one of our meetings at one point. I just know that I think it's I think because of Mark raising his desire to do this in a coordinated way and prioritize the projects, prioritize how things get worked with the FERCOG report, that feel a responsibility to answer that or honor that request.
But don't you think, Jen, by you going to talk with them, you're basically beginning that process
I hope
rather
so.
than to have all of us meet
Yeah.
all the time together, which, you know, when you get too many people,
Yeah, that's no good.
sometimes things don't get done. And I think when you go to speak with them, you can say how, you know, you're very good at summarizing and putting things in a nice, neat package, and just explain to them, you know, that we did site visits and this is what we've, you know, some of the things that came out, and say that, you know, we are all assigned different grants that were proposed in FERCOG, and we're looking into it, and then sort of get their feedback as to how they see themselves becoming a part of that, or are
Okay.
there steps they can take independent of what we're doing. I think that is the better way to do it, because I know we've all probably served on huge committees and they are the least effective, I
Right.
feel.
Right, okay. That's helpful. Tom?
Well, it does seem to me that we can, when we're actually writing a grant proposal and it's done, before we hit the send button, we can say, well, okay, Lake Wyola, what do you see about this that
Right,
you would change or whatever? You know, I think people should definitely be involved.
right.
Yeah.
So before I move to Tom, whose hand is up, Charlene, what do you think, in the same way that I'm going to give an update? I know, you know, you're giving updates also to the Lake Wyola Association, but do you think that I should come, or some representative from our task force should come and give you know, I say presentation in quotes, but kind of an update to the Lake Wyola Association too, so everybody's all on the same page?
I think that would be fine.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think when our next meeting is. Let me run and get my calendar a minute.
Yeah, well, you know, you could, okay, and Tom, your hand is up.
Thanks. It's going to be repetitive, I'm sorry, but kind of in agreement with it, everybody was saying. On the topic of coordination of the committees, the select board is technically over each of the three committees you talked about, the CONCOM, LWAC, and us. So I think the coordination exists already technically there. And Eric brought up how, like, when it comes to submitting something, it's probably going to go through the select board's eyes. And so that kind of forces it into everybody's court anyway. I think there is a lot of strength and separation for the different little groups doing their things, little or not. Time will tell, and I think it will grow into something that we do together. Somehow we'll find our collaboration. It might not be in prioritization, but it will exist. But time's also important, not to get caught up, you know, too much with the other groups while we have to do our work. So I think if each group just does their own work and is open about it and telling the other groups, it's going to be fine.
Okay.
Invitations are a great idea, but technically all the meetings are public anyway, so people can
Right.
come as much as they.
Well, yeah.
But I think
guess
they're
the
a great
issue here-
idea. And,
Yeah, the issue here is to get on the agenda, so I'm on the agenda for these other two.
Oh, yeah, I meant inviting them to our groups too and everything.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. No, I'm for
So
that.
just, I probably repeated what everybody already said,
Okay.
just to show
Tracy.
agreement.
Jen,
I think you're a great spokesperson, Jen, so you
Oh,
should do it.
thank
You
you.
should do all those groups.
I agree.
All right. Butter me up.
I have one last thing I was gonna bring to the table too.
Yeah,
You
Joe.
mentioned some of the roads actually paving them. That we have problems with, like Great Pines, a few spots just put out there when they're doing their engineering too, because maybe paving some of those roads is gonna stop a lot of that.
And FERCog had that same recommendation.
Yeah. Just a thought.
And Tracy's hand was up, but I don't think it's up any longer.
And Jen, just to know, our next Lake Wyola meeting is December 17th at 7 PM. So I usually put the agenda together. Would you like to come then or wait till the meeting after that?
No, I can come then. I'm gonna be in Puerto Rico for all these
Oh.
December meetings, but that's okay. As long as the internet is working, I'll be able to sign on.
Okay, I'll put you on the agenda.
Okay. All right. So we skipped a few things, but not key. I had that sort of first round of integrating our approach with FERCogs. I did the west side. It's just helpful for me to try to move some of these things around in different categories, because I do think, like I said, that no matter what we do, if our initial recommendation is to obtain funding for an engineering study, there are other things that can be done simultaneously that don't require an engineering study, and that funding would be applied for separately, like funding for public education programs or homeowners incentives for one thing or another, or funding for road materials that are the right road materials, or funding for, like I was going to suggest and have already suggested, that we float to the Lake Wyola Association, creating another committee, not just roads, but drainage and culverts, and not just road surfaces, that becomes an active committee. So there's things I think that are beyond the engineering for the hardcore stuff that we shouldn't lose, and that they can be worked on while the big stuff is being applied for and implemented, let's say. So I'm going to do that. I did it for the west side. I heard back only from Tom. I'm going to do it for the east side too. And so I think you guys got it, but it basically is taking FERCog's recommendations and our site stuff and putting them in those categories of best management practices, maintenance and management, and education. So I'm just going to do that for the east side too, and I'll also send that around.
and I just wanted to make a quick comment, Jen, that I thought I really like that format. Thank you for putting the time to do that. It's really helpful.
Thank you. It's helpful to me because it's so complex.
Bob, do you know how much an engineering study has for a price tag? Do we have any idea of what that amount might be?
Yeah, the one that was just shown in the book was $30,000.
Right.
And I think
FERCog estimated it to be 30.
Okay,
Oh.
thank you.
Okay, so last thing we need to do is pick another meeting date for, I hope, December. Bob is going to lead us so that we make sure we get him fully this
Yes.
time.
Not November 12th. That's my
That's right.
cocktail meeting.
I'll be there.
No. Not
So,
November 12th.
I don't know what's happening on the 19th.
Of December?
Yeah.
Please,
I'm okay.
We're sure it's not a Concom meeting?
Yeah, Bob
Right.
says no.
Oh, sorry, okay.
right.
Is there anyone
Thursday,
who can't
December
make it?
19th.
Is there anyone who cannot make it on the 19th?
7 to 9 is 2.
Oh, that's a long time. We gotta do better.
But don't forget, we have to research these grants and we have a little bit of work to do.
Right, so are you saying don't have it in December?
No, I'm just saying, I thought you thought the 19th was a long way away.
Oh, no, no, no. it's
That's
not.
what I thought she meant too.
No. So anyway, anyone who cannot make it on the 19th? Okay, good. The 19th it is,
Is 7 PM our time?
7
So-
PM.
Okay.
Unless you want to start sooner and if we run late like we did tonight. Maybe our meetings will get simpler. I hope so.
I would love a 6 o'clock start if that works for everybody else. Can you hear me?
Works
Can
for
we-
me.
Can we start at 6?
I can do 6.
Okay,
6 is good for me.
right.
I don't get home by then,
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
we need you, Jim.
Yep.
but,
Can we
I
split
mean,
the
I
difference?
finished dinner 10 minutes before we started,
All
so
right,
that's kind of the time frame I live in, but
we'll keep it at 7.
thank you.
Try to have the agendas. I'll try to keep the agendas more streamlined. Okay, so now we need someone to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Any
Second.
seconds? Meeting adjourn. Oh, do we have to take roll call again?
Yes, please. Was it Jim who seconded?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim
Okay,
seconded.
yeah.
Okay, so Wallace, I.
Galinsky, I.
Salvador, I.
Douglas,
Make-
aye.
Seaford, aye.
Stalker, I.
Yay.
Adios.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you,
night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night.
Okay.
Have a good
bye-bye.
Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah,
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Okay.
Here we go.
You too, you too. Okay,
The
bye-bye.
holidays are here.
Oh,
Gobble,
wait a minute, I
gobble.
gotta stop recording.
All right, how do you